When seasons change, we still keep it together.
Hey, Beverly Hills 90210 fans! Are you ready to dive deep, episode by episode, storyline by storyline, character by character, as we break down the making of your favorite zip code? With your hosts, Charles Rosen.
Did I say that?
Harry
This
Mullins.
heinous thing about the real person, and we're going, what? We're getting rid of this guy.
Pete Ferrero.
I'm feeling wonderful. Kathleen looks TV crush-worthy.
Like so many special guests. And all your questions. Live on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. Oh, yeah. Everybody dance now.
Well, here we
I love that. That's great.
Thank you.
It's exciting. It makes me feel like, wow, let's go.
Why
We're on
not?
the show.
You know? I agree. Everybody.
Charles, you've been off for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Away in Hawaii. How was that?
I'm kind of still there, guys, so bear with me. I made Pete. We cut it really close. Didn't get any pregame strategies, so sorry about that. But
No worries.
It was just underestimated how long it would take to get to Gelson's and back, which is a sure sign that you're back. You know.
Yeah.
That's the best LA excuse ever.
This is going to be a fun episode. I know there's a lot of excitement about Kamala joining us here. Kamala, it's been some time since you were on 90210. How are you doing these days? I'm curious.
I'm doing great, actually. This is my first year back in the business. I took some time off to get the Equal Rights Amendment ratified. Really focused on that since 2009. And I'm really proud to say that we achieved the 38th and final state needed on January 27th of 2020. And now we're just fighting Trump and now Biden's DOJ in the courts right this very moment and staging a big action outside of the Department of Justice tomorrow at 8 in the morning.
That's just amazing stuff that you're doing.
Now, I think the reason that it's Kamala, right? Or is it Kamala?
Yes.
Kamala?
No. Yes.
Why we would get
Kamala.
along, Kamala. So why we would get along so well is that I knew all of that. That was not new information to me.
There you go.
No.
You're on the same
Biden's Department of Justice, but that's not what's today's thing. But that's a good thing to be doing. No question. I do. Before we get too deep, though, I did want to say one thing out that I think I just wanted to establish. So forgive me for just butting in here for a second. But Karen also was on Aloha Time. So she currently is upstairs watching the episode. I feel like George Burns used to talk about Gracie Allen being up in the thing. She doesn't know what we're doing. But the fact is that she'll come on as soon as she finishes with the fresh take.
Oh, that's great.
Get more fresh than that, actually.
I mean, there was another thing that you wanted to mention too, and Jessica Shaw has switched cameras here. I'm just rolling with the
Two
punches.
sides of your personality were up there for a second.
It's true. Gemini.
Are you Gemini?
No.
That really would have worked well. Chuck, you mentioned earlier to me that someone passed from the spelling company that you wanted to talk about, right?
Oh, just a second on the news, moreover. But yeah, Doug Kramer, when you think of spelling entertainment, it was E. Duke, Vincent, Aaron Spelling, and Doug Kramer. And Kramer was really interesting, like kind of the Love American style and Love Boat, that kind of frothy thing that Darren Star does so well. That had to start with him. And the connection to 90210 is that when he and Aaron had a parting of their business ways, he left for all sorts of reasons. He left the company, and his assistant became my assistant on the first season of 90210, and made sure that I knew that when I was talking to Aaron's executive assistant, a secretary for years, named Renee Kamer, who spelled her name Renate. Why someone's name is Renee spelled Renate, I'll never know. But it was that. And you knew that if you were talking to Renee Kamer, you were talking to Aaron Spelling. So mind your P's and Q's.
That's great. And sadly that he passed away this.
Yes, he did. And he was a renowned art collector. He had one of the greatest contemporary art museum collections and supported museums, including the Met in New York, but many others. And an interesting man. Yeah.
All right. And Jessica Shaw is here, who I jokingly said before we came on may have been like a backstory reporter at one point. Yes? Would you say yes or a little bit different?
And I said, how dare you, Pete? I was a journalist at Entertainment Weekly, and I now am at SiriusXM, where I host a show. But yes, I guess I never quite went full tabloid. But I mean, I don't know. I did interview Shannon Doherty, so there you go.
That's very cool that you got to do that. And
Kamala, was that interview? That interview was published, right, Jessica?
It sure was.
Was that one of the cover ones with her? Was that the Devil or Angel one with her in the cover?
I don't. You know what? I interviewed her a bunch of times. That may have been one. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about this episode, the backstory. Charles, you just got to watch it today. Why don't you set up how this came about?
There were a couple of forces going through this. Basically the notion of that we were just coming out of our summer episodes, getting back to school. What would back to school be like? And where would it be? And what would it mean? And knowing that Kelly and Dylan were together. And so, there's Brenda and there's Kelly, and you got all of that being stirred up a little bit. You had me wanting to, and then losing the battle of dealing with Brenda and cigarette smoking. Were you a smoker? Did I make you smoke, or were you already a smoker?
I was a smoker, yes.
At that point, like everybody else was. Yeah. So I really wanted to deal with that drug of nicotine and really make it use. And we had a character who was there to do it, A, and B, smoked like a fiend when the camera wasn't rolling. So I'm not asking her to do anything, bad. Obviously, though, to have even any tobacco products on a set is not a healthy experience. But again, this was the 90s and It wasn't really in the forefront yet. As you saw that scene when your character, you go out with Brenda and there you are, you're sitting and you're holding a cigarette at a place of eating. You got, today it was like you wouldn't even have that outside, most likely,
Right, this next generation, they have no idea what it's like to come home after eating at a restaurant and have to like air out your clothes from cigarette smoke.
Right. Well, and cigarettes were a dominant part of my life as well. I couldn't wait to start smoking cigarettes and be in the car and be catching waves and have my this and be, like the Beach Boy. And that's, on the West Side kind of, suburban gangster or north of Sunset Homeboy like Steve, just a different, and cigarettes was part of that image.
Sure.
At that point, because even though we did know it was unhealthy, but be that as it may. And it was hard to not smoke during 90210. I had quit. I smoked a lot, and I got sick from it when I was about 33. I just gave it up. And I started in 90210 4 years later. And by the end of the time, I'm bringing 2 shirts to work. So Karen wouldn't smell smoke on me. She doesn't have the greatest snifter in the world anyway.
Right.
So I could get away with that. That's how I cheated on my wife. It was with Jessica's cigarettes. Not Jessica Shaw, Jessica Klein.
Yeah.
Her merits.
Oh, Jessica Klein. I love Jessica Klein. Well, I don't know if you know, Chuck, that Ken and I were together for several years, including the period of time that he was writing on Beverly Hills at 90210.
Well, I knew you were together as a couple, but obviously not having any, like, how long were you together before you met each other? How long were you after? And I don't have any chronology. I know that at one point you were together.
Just for clarity for anybody who's watching, you're talking about Ken. Who are you guys talking about?
Ken Biller, who is now running that fantastic show Genius.
Okay.
He's a wonderful person, still a dear friend of mine. And that was one of his first gigs after he left being an executive. When I met him, he was an executive. He was a development executive at CBS, and then I think at Fox. And then he went into writing with Chris. Chris Brancato was his writing partner.
Right. And Chris was who I hired, and Ken came along with the deal.
Yeah.
Because they became a writing team for a while.
Yeah, they were a team. And actually what I wanted to, I don't know if this is the time to bring it up, but
never a better time. Never a better time. In fact, likely you won't even get a time like this again to bring it up.
He's emotionally still driving home from Gelson's. It's all good.
No, I'm emotionally still looking down at those the coral there with the little fishes
in Hawaii.
Oh, jealous.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, Ken had been on the show for a little bit, and he proposed writing a part for me that was based on me. And I think initially was even called Kamala. And it was a love interest for Jason Priestley. And it was going to be a sort of a good arc. And at that time, I had been doing mostly features, Born in East LA, and, sort of sticking with movies. And so this was supposed to be like this arc for me. And I remember I was called and told that there was a formality before my deal would be finished. And it was to go in and see Mr. Spelling about.
Who called you? Tony Shepard?
I don't know at this point. Certainly. My agent told me, that I had to go.
Who were you represented?
Formality.
Who were you represented back then? Do you remember?
I don't. It could have been the agency.
Okay.
Remember or it could have been the Gage Group. I'm not exactly sure. But in any case, I went in to meet Aaron Spelling, and this formality ended up being not so much. And it was so painful because so much of the part had very specific things about me in it. And I remember being told that they didn't feel good about an interracial relationship for Jason Priestley. And that was something that occurred to me over and over again in my career at that time, where I would be either booked or sort of booked, and then something would happen where either the other actor wasn't comfortable with it, or the studio wasn't, or whoever wasn't. And so this was one of those cases. So I ended up with this part, not to say as a consolation prize, but certainly it was just one episode. And so, I just wanted to continue.
Well, I know. And it's an interesting story for me to hear all these years later, because we just heard a similar story from David Gale, who had a recurring part, had two different roles, about being called in and talking to Aaron about what his part was going to be and what was that. And the big mistake that your agents made, and this is no disrespect to Mr. Spelling. Mr. Spelling didn't run the show. I ran the show. So when Mr. Biller had his story, again, he's there because of his relationship with Chris Brancato. And Chris and I knew each other because excuse me, I'm just going to.
It happens.
I'm just doing the podcast. I'm just going to hang up. Mom will call you back. Love you.
I leave it in too on the audio.
But that, Brancato and I, there was 90210 was big responsibility, a lot of work to get done. Best times to get work done was Saturdays and Sundays because the phone didn't ring. And I was in almost every Saturday and Sunday at a certain point of that day. I'm going to be in that office for a long period of time. Chris Brancato was in his office as the head writer, and one of the only writers. There was a lot of top-heavy producers on another show called Hearts Are Wild, as he used to call it, Hearts Are Mild, because it was a spelling-esque CBS show. But I really gained respect for his work ethic, and I really liked him, knew him, and as they say, the two guys came there. Now, I have no. I remember meeting you and really liking you in Paul Wagner's office. And I think Jessica was probably there. Jessica Klein, her husband, late husband,
Yes.
Wasserman. I mean, we were the core team putting together what we were going to do. But the disadvantage, I don't know what went on in the other, because it wasn't privy to me and it wasn't really following what was going to be happening with the narratives. Me running the show and being the head writer, what we found was this delightful young actress who was playing stuff with Brian Austin Green, Dana Barron, and she was like, oh, wouldn't that be cute? The younger girl spoke to me because when I was a senior and vice president of the school and all of that, younger girls liked me. And, there were statutory issues. And I don't want to, we couldn't get into that kind of specificity with Brandon Walsh, but there, was on my head. So I honestly never took you, and this is, I don't know how this fits into any of your thinking here, but, and because I realize it, and I don't forgive them for having whatever the specific part of the conversation with you, especially if it was brutal. And they could be pretty blunt sometimes. And Mr. Spelling, I don't think, when Mr. Spelling spoke about race, I don't often think he did it with malice.
I don't either. You know what I think, Chuck? I think that at that time, there was consensus in Hollywood that if you had too many leads that were brown or black or anything but all American, number one, it wouldn't work in syndication. Number two, it wouldn't work overseas. So these people were seen.
No, you have the right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
you are absolutely right. And it's one of the things I don't like about it and didn't like about it is that the thinking was always transactional. That is now it's more creative. In fact, I'm really happy to see you back. You look great. And the fact of the matter is that there's so many more opportunities because
it's so different.
The world of broadcasting now is niche casting and you fit into so much. But back then, there was these strictures and you just butted and you just rammed against and tried to poke a hole and come through. But as personally, I had already done the story in something called East Side Story. With
somebody asked about this, right,
and because of that, I got to win an Imagine Award, and because one of our actresses, who was on 902 in the first year, submitted us. I didn't even know what the organization was, and I was really happy to be there. But I remember, I'm saying this roundabout story for your benefit, Kamala, because I remember Jimmy Smits being up there saying, someday you advertisers are going to really need us. We're the fastest growing demographic in this, and presaged all of those conversations.
Absolutely.
And so you can think of all the different shows that have come around that are, much more diverse. And I think of a lot of shows on ABC particularly come to mind.
Kamala, I have a question. I'm curious, did you get a sense of that when you were in Aaron Spelling's office of that there was some kind of like, I don't know if you're going to, if there's some comfort with you being the girlfriend of our white leading man?
No, not at all. He was just lovely. No, it really, and honestly, I find it hard to litigate what happened 30 years ago. It was a different time. There were different sort of consensuses, as I said. And I think people truly believed that if you put a black person or if you had a Latino person kissing a white person, it would turn off advertisers. And they may actually have been correct. So I don't know. I didn't feel that it was personal, but it was painful.
Painful, absolutely. I was going to want to jump in on this because it was painful to me. And really doing these podcasts, I relearned so much about, what was the show, what was working, what was it. And I get the ratings on one of these things they break down. And what was this? And, Ashes to Ashes, which was about a black family moving across the street from the Walshes. That was a mirror of their family. Lowest rating we got. East Side Story, one of the lowest ratings we got. Anytime that we strayed out of the the expected stuff to deal with issues pertaining to race, an episode that would almost all of them, except for Pete, except for Home and Away.
Right.
We written by Chip Johansson about a football game that gets canceled. It was
Love
based
that
on
one.
a true story that we did down the line on this. But I'm sorry you went through all of that. And I just, as I say, I have no recollection. So I think that Ken, if he was leading it, he took it into Aaron, and it was their conversation. He was very close to Gary Randall, who was the new president of spelling. So that was really out of my purview.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kamala.
No, I just feel like it's a whole new world, and it's so beautiful to walk into a space where not only do the castings say, are completely colorblind, they're gender blind, they're disability blind, they're blind in every way. And it's honestly, it's remarkable. And I'm so happy for actors now to be able to just be who they are. I remember Jimmy's another sort of Ivy League Latino that was stuck in this sort of the ghettoization and the marginalization of our community. And he stuck, many of us had to go through that, but him in particular, truly a very, very well-trained actor, highly educated, etc. But that character really did not exist. Like I remember one year alone, I played 8 Marias. It was really, and so I think looking at things now, I'm just, I feel really proud of us as a community. I feel like we really do stand for something. And once something is pointed out to us, we do respond. Like Me Too, for instance. Now Me Too has evolved to be just poor behavior, abusive behavior, regardless of whether it's sexual or not, which is another thing that we put up with vastly from not only from executives and producers and directors, but also from actors. And that not putting up with that anymore is a great step in the right direction for our business. So I just feel proud to, and also I've had the privilege of working with Gabrielle Carteris, president of the Screen Actors Guild, who has been an amazing president, and she signed on to the Equal Rights Amendment lawsuit. And so, I just feel like as an industry, we really have come such a long way, and in such a good way, since that episode.
It is good to see that things are changing for the better in so many ways. I want to ask you though about coming on set and working on this episode. I mean, you kind of come into it thinking you're going to do one thing, something else happens, and now you're an actor, so you're going to play the part that they give you, and it's the reporter, right? Yeah. So walk me through what it was like being on set at 90210 in that time. I don't think that's a secret, Charles, but wow, there was probably some tension on set at that particular time. Is that fair?
Well, for me, I'd love to hear if Jessica, in her position of interviewing them and knowing them in that capacity, if she felt any of this leak through. But as we've discussed, when we started with the triangle in the summer episodes, Shannon was not happy about the direction the series was taking. So now we're back. It's 2 episodes back, and there they are. And they're supposed to be. Kelly is clearly uncomfortable with what the transgression, and Brenda's picking that up, and Brenda is still, we got the smoking, which is a whole other aspect of the conversation we'll pick up. But it was the tension. There was real tension because the roles were shifting. The storyline was going to be going a different way. We knew at a certain point that he was going to be there for Kelly. The question was then, would he come back to Brenda? But this is way down the road. They don't know where the story's going. And it was I think that indecision. And that they see indecision, but really the fact that it was being formed as a work in progress was a little unsettling for the actresses.
It was also, just to contextualize it, I mean, coming this soon after the summer episodes, where like the show just like took off in a way that it hadn't. Like people were just, it went from being like, okay, I love this show, to like, like it was just insanity.
Totally different level. Yeah.
But I feel like what went along with that was more eyes on them, more scrutiny. So like you're simultaneously dealing with that pressure and the I don't know, the emotional heft that brings to a young cast, and to deal with that, and then also storyline that wasn't necessarily that I don't know, that just glowing toward the Brenda character, or that she felt was something that put her character in the best light. If she's sort of like doesn't really know what's going on. She goes against, I mean, in this episode, she goes against what Brandon tells her to do. Like, forget about the smoking and the judgment, that goes along with that, and the like tisking, throughout this episode. But also she's like the kind of like, quote unquote nagging girlfriend telling Dylan to take his SATs and stuff. And so I think she was sort of like, what, how did this happen? How did I become the one on the outs when it was like Brenda and Dylan, and now all of a sudden the hierarchy shifted a little bit.
Kamala, did you sense any?
Wow, that's so trippy, because I'll tell you, it's so trippy. I knew none of that. Here's what I knew. People were scared for me. Okay? People were terrified for me. And I got so many effing calls from producers going, Cam, be cool. Just be cool. And I was like, be cool. What am I going into a bear fight? No. And then I remember, and I guess it wasn't you, but some producer that wasn't Ken or Chris, obviously, called me and said, look, here's what you're going to do about Shannon. Just don't look at her. Don't talk to her. And just stay out of her way. And I was like, I can do that.
I would think that, well, let me say it this way. I wouldn't say that to you as the actress, as a producer to an actress, most likely. But what I lived the creed by my show was the same thing. Don't look her in the eye. Stay a little farther away. That's how I ran my team. Sorry, Brenda fans. That's how at that period of time.
It was like a bear, like dealing with a wild animal.
Yeah. But I think sounds to me, Pete, and it just was more, and Larry will come on if you listen on this later. It like Paul. I mean, Paul would be one that would just say that because stuff was going on. It was stuff going on, and I think that you also got affected. Did you relook at this episode?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I watched.
What you think? Tell me about what you thought about your hair and your wardrobe.
Jeez, Louise. So I got a wardrobe story for you guys. Okay, but first of all, what I do want to say before all of this, before I even get into the wardrobe story, is that it's not easy being an actress in this town. It's not easy being put under the kind of pressure you're put on with your weight, which at that time was insane. The heaviest girl on that set weighed 102 pounds, and they called her fat, and that was Jenny Garth's character. One of the characters weighed in at 89. So we had a situation with the actresses, right? From an internal psychological perspective. So I will not throw shade on any of them for what they were going through.
Sure.
But I will say this. When I went to my fitting, one of the wardrobe people was kind of like grumpy, and I was kind of looking through it going, wow, she seems a little frumpy, but I don't know, like, what do I know? I'm not the wardrobe person. And the ladies told me that every single one of the other actresses, save Gabrielle Carteris, the three, Tori, Shannon, and Jenny, all went through my rack and removed anything that they liked.
Wow.
So by the time I got there, it was kind of like, you gonna wear this purple sack and put belts around it, and then we go put your hair in a little boop-de-boop here. And then I was like, okay, but you don't want to when you're already dude, you're doing a job. You want to do the best job you can. You're dealing with all these factors. They had 8 security. It was like the Beatles. They would come out of the trailer. There were masses, hundreds of screaming people. They would be surrounded by security guards and moved from the trailer to the other, whatever tiny little space that we were in, like that weird video room, which was so tiny. Oh my God. And so it was so intense. The whole thing was so intense. That, I mean, all you want to do is just make it through the scene, not upset, like hit your marks, do your best, and not be part of the effing problem. Get out of there and not have been just one more thing for Chuck Rosen to remember in 2021 that made his life more of a fucking hell than it already was.
Yes, that sums it up. That sums it up for me.
I love it.
Poor Karen, look what you walked in on.
Karen walked in on something. Yeah, how are you? Karen Rosen is the writer of this episode. She's obviously related to Charles Rosen.
He asked me, am I resting my face? You mean my...
No, I didn't. I
nothing?
said your resting face.
Oh.
But that's fascinating stuff. Karen, you just watched the episode moments
I
ago.
did. I just watched
So
it.
you're hot off the presses. You're the first take. What do you
Hot
think?
off the
Right now.
presses. I saw in the comments some of the fans were saying, excuse me, I'm sorry, is it Kamala? Like Kamala?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, you have a great name.
It's my grandma's name.
Oh, well, and they were saying that you looked like you had more beautiful even than before. I mean, it was almost 30 years ago. Was it really? Was it really?
Yeah.
1992, it said.
So
Yeah,
29
I think that's
years
when-
ago.
that was-
So I mean, you look gorgeous. I'm just saying. So nice to see you in this. I was listening also. I was listening with one ear to the program and one ear to you guys. And it's a good thing I did watch it because this was one of those episodes that I think Chuck behind the scenes really outlined this episode for me.
Yeah.
I think I came in with this one with more with just the dialogue actually.
But you know, my favorite part of it was, and it was so Karen, and what she's saying is true because we were having to lay in what was going to be going on with the legacy key, and we're not going to really talk about that in this podcast with the beginning of Steve Sanders having the master key to the Beverly Hills High School, West Beverly Hills,
Right.
How that connects to real life, a lot of fun things, and the arc starts here. But we needed that arc in. So I'm saying to the writer, you're going to have this scene, you're going to have this scene, you're going to have this scene.
There was a lot of that. And you know, you saw how the stories intertwine pretty seamlessly. That's his specialty, and I was focusing more on the smoking story, but
Well, I was saying that was more our life, Karen. We were smoking. Anytime Karen, who was an actress in her before she was the writer and the student, anytime we'd go somewhere and see a show of people in community theater here in LA or professional, we'd be with the actors afterwards. She'd want a cigarette so bad. It would come back to it. And it had been that. And me too, as I was saying, started out by talking about the whole California surfer with the cigarette thing.
wait, can I just say something? I want to say hello to Jessica. Hi. Nice to see you. And Kamala, you were enjoying those cigarettes so much. And it makes you want to have one if you're a smoking addict, which we kind of were. And we both quit. We both had quit because we were entering childbearing years, and so there was, I quit many times before that, but then really quit. But on the show, Mr. Rosen was sneaking them.
Every bit, the Kamala will remember this, that we were a hotbed, we were a nicotine, the anti-nicotine free zone. I mean,
I was laughing at Dylan saying I don't go with smokers because he was a smoker.
Everybody was smoking. You know why? Let me just roll it back 5 minutes. Everybody weighed on the female side between 102 and 89 pounds. Now that doesn't maintain itself. You can't do that. And the guys too, I don't want to be sexist here because the guys, Look at their little legs. How skinny they had to be at that time.
Yeah, and
There's
now,
so
I don't
much
remember
more
Brian
forgiving
smoking.
now.
Did
well,
Brian
no,
smoke?
Steve,
I don't know.
Ian-
I don't know.
I don't
All
think
I know
Brian-
is there was a lot of smoking.
Or
I
Ian.
never smoked. Brian may
Brian-
have for a while. I don't think Tori smoked much, if at all. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God, someone would so
Oh,
have reported
and Gabrielle,
about
of
that
course,
if she did.
I don't know. I don't remember who exactly did or who didn't. But I mean, even in Hollywood in general, one of the main diets of actresses was just, smoking.
Well, Aaron Spelling had in his office little containers with cigarettes in them, like he could have hard candies or something, or Hershey's Kisses. He had, in fact, Luke used to talk about that when he came in for his audition, and he took the
And
cigarette out.
1990
as a
was pretty.
souvenir.
And 1990 was pretty late in the game to still be doing that. That wasn't what was,
Right.
Cigarettes had been shunned by that point, at least officially in the corporate world. You didn't go into a meeting at ABC to pitch something and light up a cigarette. It didn't happen,
How did you guys decide on what the pack would look like? Because obviously you weren't going to be able to use like Marlboros or
Right.
whatever it is.
It was suggestive of Marlboros, right? Yeah, it was a Marley.
Morley.
I think you see that if you go back to this era of television, or maybe all eras, and you could just see that they're just doing 85% of a logo, but not the logo itself.
Right.
So they can put the remnants around it, but you can't say, well, like, this is exactly this. You get some latitude,
It was like the 555 phone number.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that what I thought about my take on the smoking part of it, which, we started in France before. We started with her having cigarettes in Paris, which you kind of tend to do. And then many of the things, I feel like there was a missing ending maybe for the smoking plot, because we have Brandon saying, if you can get through this, you can get through anything. If you feel this bad and you resist the urge. And that's kind of how one of my times that I quit I was in the hospital, probably with a very ill parent, and that's when you kind of want it and you just go, no, if I can get through this one hard time, if you're trying to quit and you've called them off, then you can. So there were a lot of tips there for how smokers don't think they smell, but they smell,
Yes, I love the part where she had brushed her teeth, and you always think you're so golden.
Right,
And
exactly.
he's like, you know what, honey, I can taste the cigarette
Exactly.
right through it. That
Your
was
clothes
great.
reek. I used to say it to Chuck. In fact, I'd say, you come home, and he would sneak them there at the set, and I'd say, you smell like cigarettes, his shirt. And he goes, oh, there was many people smoking around me. Exactly what happened.
But
So
the truth was that, but as you know, the truth was there were many people smoking around me because Paul
right.
Wagner
And it
was
is
there.
hard. I
Steve
did
and
have an
Jessica were all
acting
smokers,
background, and that's theater people do smoke quite a bit too, or did formerly did.
Out now. Yeah.
And very hard. In fact, we just were on an airplane for 5 hours, and we were remarking how we used to smoke in planes. They used to allow smoking in planes, which is.
And my 32-year-old daughter couldn't believe it. Yeah, she could not believe it.
She said, "Did you ever go on a plane where there was smoking?" And we're like, "Yeah, and we smoked also." And I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I sat in a plane with that happening.
There's a whole generation growing up that doesn't realize that if you want the subway to come, you light up the cigarette, and the subway will be there in a moment. Am I right, Jessica?
Or in a restaurant, you light up so the meal will arrive.
And then the salad comes. You light up, and then there's a salad. It's the only way you can work the way it worked.
And if an actor wants to book a job, all they have to do is buy a non-refundable plane ticket.
Exactly.
Kamala, I want to ask you back to the stuff you were talking about with Shannon. Then you do get to set and you are working. You have a lot of scenes with her. So you're going to be working a lot. What was it like going from what you were warned about and then actually working with her?
So she was absolutely very nice to me. I didn't have any problems working with Shannon. She had a lot of problems with the cameraman and some of the people on the crew because she felt like this is just my perspective on it. She felt like she was always waiting around for them she would like get to set and it wouldn't be right. And then they would be trying to kind of figure it out. And then the first few takes, like I remember in the tiny little room where there was the editing and that was actually that was not a lose one wall kind of a thing. That was a real space that was very small. And it was, the director wanted to do a oneer, he wanted the whole thing in one. And I just remember it was a hard shot to get focus on, and it was just a hard shot to make, right? Because people were also moving. And she said, you have one attempt to get this right. And if you don't, I'm walking off the set. And so that made everybody feel kind of scared because it was kind of hard. And I know, and I think
Go on.
Anyway, so that I sensed that she was adamant about some things in the same way that maybe Christian Bale was adamant that people shouldn't stand in his fucking light. And I understand that it's not cool, but I also, as an actor, I understand it because you're there 18-hour days and you're whatever, and you're really trying to bring it. And then other people, it's kind of a different job. Like you can kind of be like joking around and having a good time and like seeing what works. And then boom, then suddenly all eyes are on the actor and they can't be joking around or whatever. And if they don't pull it off in that exact second, everybody's like, wow, that actor really sucks. They don't know. So I think for actors, when they get to a certain point, they expect the crew to, work with second team and get their focus and get their lighting the way they want it, so that when you do get there and bring it, not that you can't do multiple takes, of course you can, but it would be nice.
Kamala, I got to stop you. She wanted the one take so she could go clubbing. That was the life I lived with the actor.
Right.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah, that was who she was. Your director was a former first AD who she would intimidate by giving an ultimatum. Bullshit.
Beth, I want to be Kamala's best BFF. That's
thank you. No, Chuck, I'm not.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just looking at Shannon's use of power right then. And it's it's what, and you got to observe it and you expressed it really well, but that's what was going on. She was mad at our television show. She did not want to be there right then. We had broken up that old gang of hers. We had created a different pyramid. We didn't even know where we were going, but that's what we did. And you saw what you're describing, and Brad Gross, even though we kind of are the buddies we once were, he was my closest friend. And so, oftentimes people would, was she getting mad at him to get back to me? Is not out of the question. But the other thing that was going on that you should know is that this was our first union crew. This was our first, we were a non-union show for 2 years and we had stepped in. So Karen, this is Rick Gunther. Rick Gunther was one of them, had won numerous Emmys for, St. Elsewhere. And what he did for Spelling saved them and us as the production unit hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars by the way he knew how to pre-light sets. So they're putting up lights. They're getting used to it. This is only the second time that this crew has been on our glorified warehouses. So, I'm just saying, and this is no offense to anything, because this is 30 years ago. This is just what was going on at that moment in that time and space. It has nothing to do really in 2021 at all. But it was a tough time to be doing our show, right up and every element of it. I could go through every single episode, and at some place there was drama. I used to sing this little ditty in my head. What do you know about 90210? Do you know about this? Do you know about that? Do you know about, because everyone was like that. Everyone had that quality to it.
Do you think because of that drama? Do you think because of that drama, was there any, like, Karen, as you were writing, was it like, oh my God, this is going to be a relief because we can do a whole bunch of scenes that are not with this core group and we can splinter them a little bit. And was that something that felt like a relief to the writers and producers?
Not for me. I didn't feel that, but you know, I was lying next to Mr. Rosen when the phone rang in the morning with a complaint because he'd ordered a reshoot of a scene that Shannon was in, and she had redone her makeup completely from what makeup did, and her wardrobe. She had done it herself, and she looked inappropriate, let's say, for the character at the time. And so he said, we got to redo this one. So she called up really mad in the morning, and I know she had actually had a lot of respect for Chuck, I think, and did like the writing. But at this moment, she was pissed off. So she lashed out, you know, like a youngster. And she was a youngster, let's face it. You know,
Well,
I have respect for you as a producer, as a writer, as a man. You know, and there was drama like that I perceived as just behind the scenes there. But she was how beautiful did she look in this episode? She looks so incredible, terrific.
And when she's in scenes, she's incredible. She's such a talented,
really good.
actor.
She's a terrific.
You know, I mean,
Really
she is always able to bring something very special to Brenda Walsh,
Mm-hmm.
and it is because of that. You know, when the stuff happens later on with Dylan and the reveal and all that stuff, I think a lot of people, you know, sympathize with her because of what she brings to that character. So, I mean, you know, we're talking about stuff. I always like to remind when this comes up, we're talking about stuff from a very, very long time ago. But it is a truth, and it's important to talk about that. I think we're all about that these days. And if we're going to do a podcast about the stories of 90210, they have to be included in the podcast for sure. I had a chance to talk to, this is like left field now, but I had a chance to talk to Dana Barron, who was Nikki Witt. She was having some video problems, so she did an audio interview with me, but I asked her a couple of questions. I'm just going to play one of the clips. This is her about talking with or acting with Jason Priestley.
He was always very easygoing, and you know, you get in there like, oh, just say this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll do it this way. He's like, oh, you're a real actress, huh? You know, it's like, because I was taking it really, really seriously, coming from New York Broadway background, blah, 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 blah. So, no, he was just fun and lighthearted and jovial, and it was nice to be able to work with someone like that. I remember, I think, before we had this funny little trivia, before we had our kissing scenes, we know he'd always spray Banaka Blast. So it was like, oh, here comes the Banaka. You know, I think funny in that episode, you know, obviously her smoking and that huge scenes with her having to cover up her breath. And I went, oh, that was so funny because that was Jason's thing. Just Banaka to make sure you're comfortable when he kisses you. So it's very considerate in a way, but it was just funny for me. Just, you know, riding the wave of that incredible show. I mean, you jump into there, it's already working, it's moving, they have all their things down, and you have to come in and kind of ride the wave. So it was a great adventure that way.
And I have a lot more cool things that Dana said, and that's going to be available on the Patreon, and eventually will be available for everybody at some point. Chuck, there's a lot of other things happening in this episode. They're prepping for SAT, which is sort of, you know, why everybody's got a lot of stress going on, right? Talk to me about scan, discard? I forgot it already. Scan, discard, select, and move on.
That's what I was going to say. That is so vintage Karen. There, you know, believe me. The fossil
must have been. You know, I didn't take a prep course for the SATs. I just
You just started that comment, Chuck.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from, but I think that was, you know, our kids were little at the time, so it couldn't have been from that end of it. But we did a little research, yeah. But you know, that again, that's a first world problem too. SAT stress, you know.
It's a
And,
great
it makes me
callback moment in the script. I love the,
when Donna says it, right? Is that what you mean? Yeah. When Donna says it to Brenda later on, it's just like, it's so awesome. I'm like, that's such a great line. Yeah.
And I was thinking, watching it today, we talked about how different the times are in this. The University of California no longer takes the SAT, so as a factor in. So there you go. How far, how important it was central to life, and then it had its own foibles, and now something is replacing it. So
the other thing I want to get into with this episode is the backstory show itself. This sort of current affair thing. What is it based on, Charles? And talk to me about that. And I know, Kamala, I know you have some opinions about that as well, about the way it looks and all that stuff all these years later. But Charles, start with you.
Well, it really came out of the TV show that was on Fox at 7:00 every night called A Current Affair. And it was a video tabloid, a nightly, edgy kind of Rupert Murdoch-y kind of show. And
Rupert Murdoch. I don't know if anybody's ever
used
said
his
that.
network, his production company that was doing it, and the host was Bill O'Reilly, and there was a period of time, especially as we're talking about young Shannon, having to deal with the fact that the world was going to be changing narratively on 90210, stepping out and being a young person in Hollywood, and having this old curmudgeon criticizing her every move that would happen. It was almost like there was it was like a precursor to the one that is on
Lindsay Lohan.
Oh,
yeah, but also I was just thinking of the show that's on Fox, all the TMZ. It was just a precursor to that. It was a mean-spirited. When it came to Hollywood, it was very judgmental about Hollywood. That's and that was part of O'Reilly's stock and trade as he moved up the ladder at Fox News. But and so I deeply resented that, and that moral tone, and that how they shifted things around. I saw it with Us Magazine. It's when Bonnie took over. It was we're going to come to the set and be your friends, and then slam. That was not what was going to be happening. So it was, so I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder relative to that, and I could see them, trying to distort the image of Beverly Hills, because whenever there was of course I was in high school in a different era, but whenever there was like political unrest in the city of Los Angeles having to do with certainly the anti-war movement, they would come to Beverly Hills High School. They were interested in the image of Beverly Hills. So this was the kind of news story they would do. And that Samantha Sanders, connection there, they would look for stuff like that. And it was, we had that. And so to mix the two, do I honestly think that your character would, Kamala, but it would have been so naive to think that she could do a better form of journalism? And also, this is the one scene I did like what you had on, by the way. I don't mean that negative on anything else, but I thought it really highlights, your visage.
Right. I chose some
were you talking about that gigantic red jacket she had?
Yeah, well, we were talking about her red, these kind of things.
The purple sack. I see.
What were you wearing, Halston?
No, I don't mind. I didn't mind my wardrobe, frankly, that much.
There she is. But you had some opinions on this, Kamala, in terms of how today,
Yeah, well, looking through the lens of today, back at what would be seen as a horribly exploitative story, where the person feels guilt and has sort of ethical tugs about whether or not. Now, cut to today. If you're not self-exploiting and really sort of building that self-exploitation up to a brand, a billion-dollar brand, then you're some kind of an idiot. And so how quickly have we gone from, and I don't think any feminist from the 70s could have looked at what we took as female liberation, and I blame the ad agencies really for twisting what female liberation was back on us and us buying into it. So now what we think is liberating, the guys are like, yeah, seems kind of liberating to me. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell is going on with women now that's what that this model, and again, I'm not picking on anybody in particular because I think the social forces tell women that the main thing they're valuable for is their body and their looks. So if they don't commodify that, they're some kind of idiot. Started kind of with Madonna, but moved into now this Kardashian realm, which is sort of taking self-exploitation to the hyper real. And so for me, looking at this episode, I thought, wow, wouldn't it have been nice if we had gone that direction? If we had, as a community, sort of looked at it and said, it's not nice to exploit one another like this. And there are other things that, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously, naive is a word that's been used to describe me many times. So.
One of the things I thought was interesting, I was saying this right before to Pete and Kamala, like I thought it was so interesting even, and certainly, I mean, I think maybe there is, and maybe you disagree, Kamala, but to me, I see a slight difference with who's telling the story, if the woman is telling her story versus if, you know, a quote unquote news show or a tabloid show is telling the story on behalf of that woman. But it's so interesting to me that the language that was totally okay. And like, Karen, this is not on a slam on you on any level. This was on every show, you know, that it was like at that point, totally okay for a tabloid show, which you were accurately depicting what was going on, to talk about a high school girl being loose and stuff like that. And you watch that now with your 2021 eyes. And it's like, oh my God, that could have aired on TV. I mean, on a current affair or a kind of show like that.
Or Inside Edition, someone said, is the name of the show we're all thinking of.
Now today, yeah. Well, yeah, I said it's kind of that insidious, kind of mean, kind of insidious, the stuff, and kind of irrelevant too, really, largely. But it is the way to get the attention. It's a, sometimes we go to bed, you got to say, okay, what's on the local news? And, it's still, if it leads, it bleeds. I was studied to be a reporter. You know this, Jessica. I think that I did not like it. It changed dramatically. At least television journalism, broadcast journalism changed from a profession to an industry right in front of my eyes. And I went, no. And really what caused that to happen was the success of 60 Minutes. That there was money to be made in them dar hills. And everything has been always, if there's money to be made there, the funders, the lenders will follow. The money will follow.
I saw a comment here. Katie Brazier says, Kamala Lopez is a wonderful, articulate woman. She is smart and beautiful. I highly recommend reading this book. It's compelling and eye-opening. And there's the link. She said the book. So there you go.
Oh, wonderful.
I wanted to plug that. Wow. In regards to the Shannon thing, Zara writes a comment here. It's a little bit long-winded, but I'm going to read it and just get all your thoughts on this. And I think it's fair to read this. She says that she's talking to someone else in the chat, but she says that Shannon's late father was sick in 1992. She had a lot to deal with. That fact, he had cancer. She went through a lot. I'm not suggesting that she should get privileges because she's the star of the show. I am saying she is human. People react to situations differently, and the media twist is around claiming Shannon's behavior. She isn't a villain. Luke also said that Shannon's been thrown under the bus. Give it a break. She's human like the rest of us. So I think it's fair to say that she's human for sure. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? On Zara's comment? I just wanted to make sure I aired that side of the story. Unlike,
put it up. Yeah, put it up. Pete, put it up again one more time. I really love Zara, and he says it, but I'm not just. Well, yes, you are suggesting she should get. It's a professional venture. I know the feelings come into it, and people's feelings like that. But as long as one can, the stresses of life is really what's hard.
Yes,
we all have that. And the thing about show people is, what if there's no people like show people? They smile when they're blue. The show goes on.
Right.
It is what we sign. It's what actors in a community sign up for, right? Karen and Kamala.
Yeah.
So when that gets breached for whatever reason, it's a cause of concern.
Sure.
And no one's saying the other, but it is, this is, you're looking at again a different world, a different lens from today than what was the lens of 1992, or what people expected from each other and how they treated each other and what was the norm and what wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've kind of covered all of the things that are happening in this episode. I know we wanted to talk about Nikki a little bit more, and I have a couple of more clips. I wanted to just play her clip here talking about whether or not she felt intimidated on the set. So here's that.
Well, I was definitely, like I said, I kind of started to understand the overwhelming popularity of the show. Because I knew two people, I guess getting to know all the other people was always a challenge because they don't know you and the other people do. So it's always a little bit like, huh?
Mm-hmm.
But no, it was intense just to be able to make sure the quality of the character was always there for the show and to make it fun and to be part of the show, because she wasn't really Beverly Hills, but she was, and it's like a little bit here and there. So I wanted to be able to make sure I fit in with everybody, but yet be myself, because Nikki Witt was such a free spirit.
So it was more about the character for her. Really good stuff here. Hey, Jessica Shaw, I'm curious. I don't know why I said your full name like that, but hey, Jessica, I'm curious for you watching this episode back. You were a reporter. Were a reporter. Obviously, I joked around with you a little bit about the tabloid stuff, but did you have any strong feelings looking at this episode from the other side of the story, trying to get a story and making sure that you cover it the right way and sort of all of that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think it ends just because I've been writing for so many years. And I think there are stories that I wrote years ago, 20 years ago, that I am not proud of today. And it was interesting, that comment that you had up on screen about Shannon a second ago. I think many things can be true that maybe, even as I look back with perspective on things that I've written and things that I've read, there a lot of things can exist at the same time. She could have had a scrutiny that a lot of people did not have on them, especially as
100%.
the industry, especially, with so many things. That could have been true. And she could also have been calling Chuck up at 6 a.m. and cursing him out. Those things can exist and did exist simultaneously. And it's not a, she should be vindicated or she's the devil kind of thing.
Exactly.
So yes, and I do think that I don't know. I think maybe with experience, and age, you get to see more of the many things that exist in a story instead of just one, linear picture of this is how it is, and I'm going to portray this whatever it is hour I spent with this person as the absolute indefensible truth.
Absolutely, very well said.
I do want to say one thing about how lovely Jason Priestley and Luke Perry were to every guest actor that came on, and me in particular. They really went out of their way. It almost was like they understood that it was a difficult set, and that maybe some of us coming on might have been a little intimidated or whatever, or frightened. And they just really went out to make you feel comfy and welcome. And I remember that so strongly because I'm a feminist. So I was wanting to be friends with the girls, but the people that really came to me and showed me love were definitely the dudes.
Very true. We've heard that. Yeah. Important conversations here on the show. I just want to thank you, Kamala, for coming on here and speaking about a lot of the things that you talked about here. I think it's so important to be having these conversations in the lens of 90210 or wherever. It's a really important time, and I'm just glad that your voice is out there doing what you're doing. I know that you have a documentary that you did and the book that was referenced here. So just keep fighting the fight. And Charles, somebody who's fighting all kinds of fights for a long time too, and Karen as well, and Jessica, I'm sure, and just much appreciation for you guys doing that. So this was a great episode. I think we kind of covered the backstory. You know what I mean?
The backstory on the backstory.
Certainly got the backstory of the backstory. And next week we will be back. We're going to talk with Caroline Lagerfeld, who was David's mom on the show, and she's going to be here. We're going to be covering a couple of those episodes, which were also a very important mental health issues thing, where they go to Portland to find her, and she's missing, and she's homeless, and a lot of touching stuff happening there. So make sure you tune in next week as well. This has been great. Charles and I are headed to a After Dark Zoom, and everyone else, we will see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.